We just got to Graham's house. It's time to go in here. It looks like it's a studio garage, so let's meet this dude. Let's do the interview. I'm pumped. Let's roll.
All day, man. Gotta do it.
Gorgeous, man. Thank you. All right, Graham. Man, thank you so much for having me in your home, in your studio.
Come on, man. You're in the garage. This is we used to call this the palace. This is a special place, man. This is a special place to be. So I'm really glad you're here. This is where we get down, man. This is where we've done a lot.
I'm feeling it, man. I'm feeling it. I'm excited to be here. I mean, I flew up here to see you, man. This is the first time I've ever flown to someone for an interview. But I was like, if I'm gonna do this, I want to do it right. I want to look you in the eye. I want to connect with you, and
I'm honored by that, man. I'm honored, and I'm thankful for your mission, for doing this and helping us get like a good message to the world. I'm proud of you for what you're doing, and really inspired that you came up here. Like, thank you guys. It's big, man. Yeah.
So, all right. So as you know, like sports psychology, peak performance, optimal performance, all this stuff is very new to most people, right? And so the mission of what we're doing here is we're trying to democratize it. We're trying to get it out to the world and have them understand it. And so, to a layman, someone who maybe just wants to get better, but they don't know any of the terminology, how do you help people?
Good question. It's like anything else, right? Like someone's got to want to help themselves. Like you can offer all this good stuff to someone, but if they're not open-minded to it, it's really challenging to do it. So I think the world seems open-minded to this stuff right now, like very open. And so for me, how I help people is I always try to like normalize mental training and make it bite-sized, make it reasonable, make it something that wasn't like, oh, you're messed up in the head. Go see that person in the corner because you're all screwed up and get right. And I was like, that's off, right? That's not really going to help us do it. So I consider myself like a proactive teacher, really. And so what I've been doing the last 15 years is I've just been teaching mental training without really, like I told you, waiting for people to ask me, because I was like, they're not going to ask. And the way I would teach it is I would try to make it as simple as possible, put it in terms that everyone could understand, and speak to it like it was a positive thing. Not like, hey, you got a problem, let's fix something. Never even mention any of that. We're like, here's really good information, and we start with, hey, focus on what's in your control. That's like the foundation of everything, is what's actually in your control. And in sports, one of the crazy things is what's not in your control is results and outcomes. And that's what everyone obsesses on. Obsesses on winning and losing. It's futile. Like, to think like that is all, your energy is already, in my opinion, off, because you're missing what's actually in your control. So that's the start of mental training to me, is just awareness, building awareness. Hey, are you aware of this, right? Are you aware that we can focus on my attitude, my effort, my energy, what I'm doing now, and that wins and losses are either somewhere in the future or somewhere in the past, right? And we have to learn to kind of be here now. So the training is really learning to be present, right? That's why your breath's important. I don't know if anyone listening was aware they were breathing, but they're breathing. If you can tap into your breath, that's happening now. And these principles aren't new. So if you go study like samurais from like thousands of years ago, they were doing this. They were working on Zen, right? They were working on getting present, learning to be in the now. So none of these concepts are new. Sports psychology is not new. The name sports psychology is kind of new, but these actual principles have been here forever. And my goal was to bring awareness to this, bring some life to it, bring some fun to it, and make it something that, as funny as it sounds, like cool, And so I started training young kids who played basketball. Because to me, those were the coolest when I was young. It was like, basketball is cool. I want to play basketball.
In the United States, basketball is the coolest.
Right?
Yeah.
And so I thought, if I can train young basketball players, help them get to the NBA, and then by the time they get to the NBA and they start telling their story of what they've been doing, now we've normalized mental training. Because they're like, hey, I've been meditating since I was a teenager. Like, this is, of course you do this. Of course you do mental training, right? And it's normal. Mm-hmm. So that was my goal, to do that. And so mental training to me it starts with awareness, and just start with what's in my control. That alone is almost a lifetime's work, is focusing on what you can control. I mean, think about going through your day, all the things that are out of your control in your day. You said your plane got canceled, right, coming up here. That's something totally out of your control. How do you deal with that? Does it overwhelmingly stress you out? Do you become a victim and blame things, or you have compassion? You're like, hey, that's part of it. I'm going to roll with this and learn how to keep moving forward, right, with ease and grace. instead of like this anxiety, like everything is destroying you. So we have opportunities every day to work on this stuff. I just always found sports as kind of a great medium to teach in this stuff. So there's no quick fix. There's no overnight success. This is just like any other skill, right? After you have awareness, then it's all about repetition. I have to practice over and over and over again. So I always ask the question to people, hey, where are you? And your answer should be, I'm right here. And if you're not right here, where are you? Because your body's here, and we have to train ourselves, everything else to be here as well. So I've been doing this for 20 years. I'm 39 years old. It's an everyday practice for me. It's not like one day you're like, I've got it, and I never have to work on it. It's an every moment thing, you know, being conscious, being tuned in. You just get better at it when you practice, you know? You get better.
Yeah. So I want to kind of go back in time a little bit and hear about what was the thing, what was the spark for you to even start thinking about how you think?
Right.
And becoming consciously aware of how the way you think or pay attention to how you think affects your physical reality.
Totally. When I was 19, this was 1997, my first year of college. I was going to a junior college in Santa Cruz. And it was like everything I thought who I was started to crumble at the end of I played basketball. It was Cabrillo Junior College. And I sprained my ankle after the season. First time I'd ever like severely sprained my ankle. And everything in my life kind of just started to fall apart. My mom and I had a falling out at home. I was in a relationship. Sorry, there's a truck out there. I was in a relationship, and it kind of went its course. And everything that I thought was who I was kind of went away. And I had this massive identity crisis of who I was. I got like very depressed, very down. And I had this moment where I was like, okay, this is going down, you know, like I feel awful, like really low. And I said, just ask for help. And it was when there was payphones. And I remember the payphone I went to at Cabrillo Junior College. I was like, I'm going to call my mom. I'm going to ask for help. And I don't even know what that means, but at least it's something. And I called her on the phone. She picked up. And I said, I'm struggling. Like, I'm really struggling. I'm low. I feel like my mind, I'm just gone. And she said the words, did you know you can rewire your brain? And I was like, I don't know what that means, but I heard hope. So I said, whatever that means, I'm doing it. And so she introduced me to my teacher. And it was more about healing. It wasn't like sports psychology or even the words mental training or peak performance. It was healing and becoming whole. And I had left my body. I wasn't here. I was like anywhere but here. The present is so uncomfortable, so awful. I was gone, and it causes this overwhelming stress, right? And I started to do my work with my teacher. And the start of it was learning to love myself unconditionally, saying affirmations to myself, like I love myself unconditionally, writing that down over and over again, learning to meditate, learning to breathe, learning to visualize. And this is 1997. I'm 19 years old. I'm a young man. Nobody is talking about this. So as I started to do this work, though, it literally was changing my life. And I was like, oh my God, like my whole life is changing from this. And I didn't know how to share it with anybody because I felt like I had received this gift, which was basically just reaching out for help. And then once the help came, of course, you can put yourself back together. And that became the start of, I have something. The world needs to know this. And there was a seed planted in me that was like, man, I did the work pretty hardcore for a couple years, like really working on myself. And it wasn't through sports or anything. And then I transferred to UC Santa Cruz, and I thought, I still want to play basketball. Like my love for the game came back, and I walked onto the team and made the team. And as I was on the team, I was not the best player at all, but my mind was on a whole different level. And I was like, wait a second, like you can't stop me, you can't break me. I just keep moving on to the next play. I didn't even know that terminology yet, but I would just keep moving forward. And it was like, it was starting to build already what my mission was in this world, because I realized like this isn't about physicality. This is about a mindset and awareness. And then when I finished college in 2001, I got my first job, and I met a guy named Donald Foyle, who was playing for the Warriors at the time. And he said these words to me. He said, have you ever heard of sports psychology? And I don't know if you've ever had a moment where you go like, and like literally like the light bulb moment. And I was like, oh shit, that's it. And I was like, what's sports psychology? And I asked him, and I already knew it was it. And I was like, what is that? He was like, it's learning how to like play sports and have your mind deal with pressure and all this. And I was like, huh? And I remember I quit my job immediately. And I was like, yep, this is it. And I went in quit, and then I never looked back. And my parents were like, how are you going to get a job? Like, first of all, what is sports psychology? It's not like you could go on like Craigslist at the time and find a job. It didn't matter to me. My job was to make it a job. That was my calling. And so I enrolled in graduate school. I got into John F. Kennedy University in their sports psychology program. And it was like I'd found it. I'd found what was calling me. And it just became really obvious to do it. And it was terrifying at the time because there wasn't jobs, but it was also not terrifying because I was like, I know this is it. And I would like light up when I would do it. My energy would be really, strong. Mm-hmm. So I said, I can't live a life where I deny that. I can either go do some other job, pretend I don't hear this calling, and like deny this, which is terrifying, or I can go do this job, which is obviously calling me, and there are no jobs, which is also terrifying, but yet I know it's the thing to do. Mm-hmm. So I went for it. And I was like, I'm going to normalize mental training. And I started off with a JV basketball team in San Francisco. And I said, if you can teach it to 14-year-olds, you can teach this to anyone. If you can't teach it to 14-year-olds, it's not simple enough, right? You have to make it so simple. E equals MC squared always stuck with me. Like, here's Einstein's life work. It comes down to like 4 letters, or a couple letters. And every grammar school kid knows those letters. They don't necessarily know what it means, but you can retain it. And I thought that's the simplicity I'm looking for to help with mental training. So I went to Mission High School in San Francisco. I'm from San Francisco. I wanted to go to the high school that really needed help. And so I went to Mission High School and started doing this work and was there full-time for 6 years. And it was like my laboratory. That's where I developed it and kind of developed a language, a way to talk to people. And it was me starting kind of like getting credibility too, right? Like doing it from where you're from at the ground up. Instead of just like, I'm gonna go work with an NBA team. So just start where you are, and slowly build it.
And so how are you making a living at that time? I'm sure they weren't giving you a big salary at the JV basketball team, sports psychologist.
I got $1,500 a year to coach the basketball team, and I'm living in the Bay Area, so it's not like a cheap place to live. I did whatever I had to do to like make it work. So fitness was always like a big part of my life. I've always worked in the fitness industry, so I kind of worked as like a personal trainer, like a fitness manager, stuff like that. I was a substitute teacher for years at Mission High School. I taught special ed history there for several years, all kind of hustling though, like never really a kind of permanent job. Yeah. And always, I didn't want to get too deep into the job because my job was to do mental training. That was just, I had to like somehow make it in the world, and make money. But it was hard. I mean, a big part of, and I'll be really real, it was like I sacrificed money for this because something had to give. For me to do this, something had to give. So a lot of it was student loans. A lot of it was credit cards. A lot of it was like, holy shit, like I have to do this work so bad. I don't have any money. But if I waste my energy holding down a job, that's going to derail all of my mental energy to do this. Mm-hmm. So I just took a loss, like a massive effing loss. But I was like, I can't do it any other way. And instead of calling it a loss, I would call it an investment. What are you investing in? Myself. And for whatever reason, I was aware of my calling, and I could not do it. So I had to sacrifice money. And when I first moved in with my wife in 2007, we weren't married yet. We had been close for like 9 years. And one of the first things I said was, we're going to be broke for a while. And she looked at me like I was fucking crazy, right? She was like, what? And I was like, that's just what's required right now. Most people's journey is they make a bunch of money, and at some point in their life, they're like, now I want to go do this thing. And I was like, I got to do the thing first, right? The thing is calling me so much. And all that's required is we deal with this thing called money, which is everyone's big fear, right? Everyone is polarized by money. They live for like a pension, or they live for a certain amount of money in the bank. And I thought that's really fear-based. And I was like, that's not even wealthy to me, right? And so I had to, how I did it was reframing every day what was going on and looking at debt or looking at those in a different way, right? The reason me and you are talking today is because of that, right? Because of that. I didn't get started today. Once I had a certain number in the bank, I'm like, now I feel comfortable to live my purpose. I'm like, it's happening now. Mm-hmm. So it was a sacrifice. And ironically, to train athletes, they all related to that. They could relate heavy to a sacrifice. They could relate like, you're really, like you're doing it. And so it was also something that I got really comfortable with, and I got to the point where I was like, I could be homeless, living on the street, yet I feel so abundant and so fulfilled, I'm fine. I have was, married and I have like 2 kids now, so I don't want to be homeless.
Yeah.
But that's what I had to make peace with. I had to make peace. What's the ultimate fear? I don't have enough money, I'm homeless, and I lose everything. And I was like, fuck that shit. Like, I'm not afraid of that. I want to see that. And every time I would try to like prove that this wouldn't work, it would just work even more, right? It would just work even more. And it would be like, it would just like compound. But I had to deal with real fear. And the loss was money. And so I tell people I didn't make money for a decade. And I'm like, so I get calls all the time. People are like, how do I do what you're doing? I'm like, hey, let me tell you what I'm doing, right? This is the human part of it. Spiritually, I was lined up always. I'm as wealthy as they come in that space, right? And I think that there's different kinds of wealth besides just like money, right? There's energetic wealth. There's different kinds of abundance. And I had to sacrifice money in the bank for it.
Yeah, Graham, you don't really know my story, but it's so interesting that we went on a very, very similar journey and like the same mindset around so many of these things. And I think it's probably because we both have such strong interest in this area and strong conviction for it. But
yeah,
it's how much did you kind of feel like you're destined to go on this path? And once you kind of found your niche, you're like, nah, I'm gone. I'm being pulled towards this, and like I don't really have a choice.
That was it exactly. Once reaching out for help as a 19-year-old was the start. Doing 2 or 3 years of serious work on myself kind of made things so crystal clear. I had gotten to what I would consider like a source inside of me, and it was like, this is clearly what you need to do. And it was so clear, and I felt so confident doing it and had so much healthy energy. It was like, I have no choice but to do it, because to do the opposite of this would be dis-ease to me, right? Which is where dis-ease comes from. Like, it's literally dis-ease. And so I was like, I can't do that. If the only sacrifice is like numbers in a bank, I'm down for that. Like, because I already feel wealthy, and I already knew from being in that space I could influence people because it was so powerful, right? And so I didn't have a choice. Like telling my wife we're gonna be broke, like that alone is putting everything on the line. I'm like, this is what's gonna happen, and then you can make a choice. I mean, you can make whatever. I don't have a choice. I have to do this. That's real. Like, I don't have a choice, and I would respect anyone for not wanting to be around me, but I didn't have a choice, right?
Yeah.
I didn't.
And so along this journey, obviously being in this field, you've heard of the 10,000 hours and that being on average, and whether it's 3,000 or 30,000 hours, how many years did it take you before the rest of society looked outside looking in, was like, hey, Graham, you look successful now, man?
Good point.
Just to give people a frame of reference.
No, really good point. So I started full-time in 2004. That's when I was like all in, no questions asked. And I would say 2016 is when it all jumped off. So 12 years, right? And then 2016 is when Lucid acquired me, and I became the voice for Lucid. And then I had to do like tons of media articles from then, and then just it like all took off from there. So it's funny how it does kind of line up with some of these like principles. I always felt warm inside, where I was like, the rewards are so personal, so internal. I'd have these monumental wins just from like going to Mission High School and like giving this energy and serving, and no one would even know what was going on. I'd be going home going like, you just won so big. Like, I'd be like, you just won so big. So I was never an outside validation that did it for me. It was an inside validation that did it for me, because I was so tuned in to like, your state of being inside is where your quality of life comes from. You could have 6 private planes, but if you don't have an internal quality of life, those private planes don't mean a single thing. So I would get the reward inside. So I always felt immediately like overwhelmingly rewarded, but I would say other like humans didn't see it for like probably 12 years. And then now it's, it's just blowing up.
Yeah. And so you found your obsession, and that's incredible. The thing that I struggle with when I talk to people who are trying to figure it out, young people, and maybe they're getting older and they haven't found that thing they really want to commit themselves to. I don't know if you ever have conversations like this, but what would you tell someone who is like, man, I wish I had that fire in my belly like you did, like you do, like before they can, because so many people don't ever find that thing.
Well, I would say it's work to find it. Like, that was my job, was to find it. So it's not like something you just kind of like luck into, or like it's supposed to come to me. Like, you have to actively work to find it. And in my experience, you have to actively sacrifice stuff to find it. It's a job. That's what I think your job is. So you go explore stuff, you go try stuff, you go try a job, and you're like, clearly this isn't it. Great, quit that shit. But no, do it. Do it. It's you going into that space where you don't have enough money. That's when you'll find it. So if you're like, I want to have all this security and have all this, like everything is, you're not going to find this thing. Like the way you find it is by letting go of all that stuff. And you literally go discover it, and you work, and you work, and you work, and you work, and it requires you to make decisions that don't seem logical, but are deeper here. So if you're waiting for it to come to you, I would say that's like waiting to go like have the gym come to you to work out. You have to like go to the gym. And if you've never been to a gym before, it's probably awkward just going the first day. And you feel embarrassed and weird. So my point is like, that's what this is. My first thing was like, oh my God, I'm about to lose it. I'm gonna reach out for help. No one was telling me to reach out for help. There was no like males leading the way in that. Everyone was like, that's weak if you do that. So you have to counter your own limiting stories that are telling you to not get out there and explore, to not get out there and try something different. So you have to be adventurous, you have to explore. If you don't want to be an adventurer, you don't want to explore, then you can say, I haven't found my thing, it doesn't come to me. I'm like, yeah, but you've never like gone out and tried, right? And so this is your job. Your job is to go find it.
Yeah.
This is just my experience and opinion.
Well, it's a very existential thing to discuss, because I always think about like why doesn't everyone else feel like I do?
Right.
As long as I've been alive, I've always been like, there's got to be something that I'm here to do.
That's right.
What is that thing? And then I don't ever want to put myself above or below another person, because I feel like we're all equal. But then I wonder, I was like, why don't other people, why don't my friends that I grew up with, like, why don't they have that fire in their belly to figure that out?
Now sometimes, like, think of like a family you come from. Like, there's real pressure from families. My mother literally told me, if you do not find it, I'm going to disown you. And she was playing with me, but she wasn't. So I was like schooled in this. You know, my mother had me when she was like 20, and she'd ask me the question like, okay, you got 50 million in the bank. What are you doing tomorrow, right? And
so good.
Bing! I'm like, I'm going to Mission High School and just giving this away for free, working for $1,500 a year, and going to use student loans. That's what I would do. You know, she was like, go do it. And I was like, oh wow. So I was like pushed in this direction, and this was considered success to me. So when someone says they're successful, 99% of people I know, they think that's money. They're like, oh, I have money. And that's not what success is to me. It's money. But a lot of people with a bunch of money are then still searching for what they're really trying to do. So success to me is you go find this thing. You work for it, right? You go out there and it's hard if your family's like, go be a lawyer, don't go find this thing, you're a disaster. Like, that's hard, right? To go away from, like, you kind of have to almost separate yourself from anything that's telling you differently, or else you're just going to play it comfortable and be like, okay, my parents said be a lawyer, I'm a lawyer. And then you're like a 47-year-old lawyer and you're like, fuck, I don't like being a lawyer. Now I'm going to go like pet puppies. And I'm like, great, that's it. Like, you work for the SPCA, that's it, that's it. That's where you feel fulfilled. And it's hard. So I almost feel like I was like, this was supposed to happen to me. I'm also extremely competitive. I mean, extremely. So I took my competitive nature and put it into unlocking myself. It was like, I'm going to compete at unlocking who I am and finding it, and learning how to protect myself around a vibration around you that's like, what are you doing? Like, oh my God, you know, don't do that. And I was like, no, I'm doing it. And so it was hard. I mean, like, it was challenging, but I also loved the challenge, right? I enjoyed the thrill of finding something deeper. And I mean, what other people call pressure, I call joy, right? And it's love for me. Like, that's where I unlock things. That's where, like, creativity comes from. I was much more curious about creativity than I was stacking numbers in a bank. Like, I could stack any number in a bank, but what's that going to do for me?
Sure.
Now stacking numbers in a bank doing this does a lot. It's fulfilling times like 1,000, because you're like, I can't believe I get paid to do this, right? So I was like, hey man, like, life's long, you know. Spend your 20s finding this. Why not? Spend your early 30s finding it. Do it till you, whatever, because what's a life without it? Massive sacrifice has to occur. So when I at this level, when it looks like I have success and all this, I'm like, this is what it took. It took sacrificing money, comfort. I look at the phrase like this: when you first start doing something kind of bold, right? People say like, "What the fuck are you doing?" They look at you, and so they're projecting fear. A lot of times it's because they wanted to do it and they don't know why they didn't do it. So it's like, I kind of don't want you to do it because it makes me feel uncomfortable because you're going for it. But after you do it for a while, after that, they say, wait, how are you doing this? Because it's working. And the third stage is everyone cheers you on. Like, keep doing what you're doing. Yeah. Everyone wants to be at that stage where you're getting cheered on. It was a 12-year process before I was getting cheered on. But internally, I was always cheering myself on. That's the key. I wasn't looking for outside validation. It was the internal validation. When I started training Aaron Gordon when he was a kid, you know, the Orlando Magic player, he used to ask me, like, how come you don't need my validation? Like, you come down here, you teach, you just give all this information, then you just fucking leave. Everyone else teaches and helps me because I know I'm going to the NBA. And they're like, what's up? It's like a plan for them. Like, why? He was like, why don't you need anything from me? I'm like, because that's what you're looking for. You're looking for that same thing too. Like you're looking for your own internal validation instead of like outside world telling you you're doing good. We're all looking for it inside. I had found it, and I just wanted to go serve. And combine that with my competitive nature and my, you know, my willingness to see this through. I have a quality where, like, I will just methodically do this every single day, day after day, day after day, and put it to work. Because when you love something, my experience was time, your experience of time changes, right? So I'm talking to you now and it still feels like it's 2004, right? It's the same experience to me of going into something and doing it. This is just the next part of the process. So as much as I've sacrificed money and I became really comfortable being broke, I'm now having to be comfortable with lots of money, which is a different experience. But I have to like let it happen because there's like a process where you keep serving. So I try to do like good stuff with money and put it to good use. But the deepest wealth is like finding this thing. But you have to work for it.
Yeah.
So, but like, why wouldn't that be your job?
Of course.
Why isn't that is your job, right? And then if you look, now if you're in physical danger, that's different. If you're in physical danger, get yourself out of that situation. I'm talking about like emotional intelligence. Where you're like, it just feels really uncomfortable. My mom doesn't know what's going on. Everyone's freaking out. And you're like, yeah, but I know this is right. Follow that.
Yeah, 100%.
Follow that.
100%, man.
Follow that.
Yeah. So we have all these emotions, and you talked about the state of mind that you're in during this process. I want to know a little bit about how you methodically tracked and progressed as a teacher, as a coach, as a mentor. Were there any systems for tracking that you had for yourself?
The most important system I ever tracked was my energy. So what I always say is energy is my offering. I can go into any environment, any place, and provide positive energy. And that takes a ton of internal work on my part, right? Mindfulness, you hear this word all the time, right? It's just a consciousness, like being aware of like what actually puts me in a good place. So I would always judge that. I knew I was on the right track because everything was aligned. Everything felt right, right? And I was tuned into the subtle of my body. So that was my system. And as the energy was lined up inside, and I would feel so fulfilled doing the work, like so fulfilled, I would keep my eyes open. And the next step would clearly present itself. You'd see someone come into your orbit, you'd be like, oh my God, look at this person who's here. Like, I was thinking about you 3 years ago, and now you're like, hey man, what's up? Do you know anyone who does mental training? You'd be like, wow, is this really happening? Like, how you doing, right? So these little like miracles looked like they're happening, but it was because I was aware of my energy, and I would consciously be in that positive energetic space wherever I went. And that alone was like so contagious, right? And then I would keep my eyes open and like look for like the signs, for lack of better words, like look, and you would see a sign, you'd be like, oh my God, it's right there.
Yeah. And so, like when we talk about some tactics, obviously it's easy for a basketball player to visualize shooting a free throw.
Yeah.
But what about you? Like, did you do visualization? Like, how do you visualize actualizing this? Because it may be, obviously it's harder for you to do it.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of other people who may be watching this are trying to tangibly think about like what they're trying to manifest and how they can, really actualize that in their mind before it becomes reality.
So good question. I would say one, there's something that wants to manifest itself within you. So it's not like forcing an agenda. We're like, I want to go like be this person. I got to be here, be this job. That's kind of almost your own agenda. I think the powerful agenda is when you tune into an agenda that just has to happen inside of you. And you're like, clearly, like this has to happen. I didn't choose to love basketball. I was just aware I did. I don't know where it came from, right? But I was just aware of it. I didn't choose to love it. I just became aware of it. So I became aware that was the place for me to go teach, right? So I wasn't like forcing an agenda. It was almost like it's so clear this is an agenda. I don't know where this agenda comes from, but I can hear it, right? And then so once you would hear it, I would just learn to kind of follow it and then check in, what's my energy like every day? Am I feeling abundant, big, open, mindful, or is it small, restrictive, like fearful? And I would just be super aware of that. And it's a process, right? Because sometimes we have like an ego-driven agenda. And you might be trying, like, if you're like, I need to visualize to get this certain money to the house. I'd be like, is that really your agenda? Or is that your ego freaking out right now because you ultimately feel pressure from a certain place and you think this house is going to do it for you? You know, it's like, I meditate every day. I did 30 minutes, then I did an hour. I don't know if that's it. Like, we're not meditating to time the meditations and say who did more meditation. So it's really subtle. You have to be aware of it, because there's folks out there who will do this stuff, but I'm like, why are you doing it? Why are you doing this? Like, what is your intention at your deepest root? And to me, to find your intention, you have to do some real searching, right? I mean, the obvious intention is, I just want a bunch of money in the bank, and I want to have this car, or I want to possess this thing, or I want to have this. And then you go have these things, and you're like, I'm still have this searching. That wasn't what I was searching for. So you can keep searching and searching and searching for like these what I call outer level things, more of an ego-based thing. But that's not the deepest thing. So you have to kill your ego, which is a ruthless experience. I'm talking ruthless. I say words like that because it's what it takes. Because if you stay in that ego space, you'll stay in a relatively scared space. And your ego's never satisfied. You can make $1 billion and they'll say, I need 10. Then you go make 10, and it's like you're almost a victim to it. So the work is making peace with it. You're like, I hear you.
So talk to me about the death of the ego, because I have my own modality I've created that I use with athletes or anyone that I work with. And for me, it's a very kinesthetic, like energetic experience of moving through whatever, I guess I would call it someone's greatest fear.
There you go. Yeah.
And moving through and coming out on the other side and just like living in that. What does that look like for you when you work with someone?
I literally am hoping that their greatest fear occurs, right? Everyone's trying to avoid that. I'm like, I hope it happens to you. So if we just we can use basketball, for example, or we can use like someone with a job. An average person's fear is probably like they're broke and homeless. I mean, death tends to be, like there's a big fear in death. But before death, let's say it's like losing all my money, being homeless, and being alone. Like the root of it's kind of being alone. For like a basketball player, it might be like, oh my God, I missed 15 shots and I don't get like a contract. And what I hope is that fear happens, because when it happens, you go, oh, this isn't the end of the world. I'm clearly still alive. So what does that fear mean? It means it was an illusion, right? It wasn't really there. I look at fear as you in disguise. So if you go towards your fear, you're coming towards your most authentic self. Now, not physical danger, right? If there was a man here with like a samurai sword, I'd be like, we need to get the fuck away from this person. Yeah. But emotional intelligence requires you to go towards fear, right? You've heard false evidence appearing real. There's a bunch of acronyms for fear, but it's fear. So it's like, it's counter-instinctual. Your instincts are to run away from fear. That's survival mode. Thriving mode is like, I have a choice what I do here with this fear. And so you constantly go towards it. And everyone's fear is different, right? Everyone has a deep fear that's different. And if you honor the fear and kind of like try to avoid it, in my experience, you live in this anxious state. And it's like fear's dictating what you do, as opposed to like, let me stop, let me face this fear, let me open my heart up, let me have tremendous compassion, let me just go feel whatever this is. And you ruthlessly go towards it. And as you go towards it, you're like, wow, it's really not as big as I thought. And you start to experience it, and you're like, okay, it was an emotion, but now I'm working on emotional intelligence. So I do not have to run away from this. But the only way you know you don't have to run away is you have to go towards it. And no matter how much money you have, you still have to do it. Right? Money won't make it go away. Like, you have to actively want to do it. So when I work with people, it's about building trust and about me being able to coach them towards that place. But they have to have an open mind to want to do it. So sometimes it can take us 2, 3, 4 years before we even have the trust. Because ultimately, when people first feel like they're going towards fear, they feel like they're going to die. And they're like, no, I'm going to die. I'm like, you're not. But I hear you. That's a story. Now, what would happen if that story got demolished? Because it's your ego telling you that. So we're going to go towards that fear. You're going to realize you're not going to die. And then your ego, all of a sudden, what does that tell you about it? It's full of shit a lot of times. It's full of shit. And its only job is trying to stay comfortable. And staying comfortable is where we stay in this middle ground. And the middle ground is the ultimate loss to me, right? So comfortable being uncomfortable, you've heard that. And I paired these words, victory goes to the vulnerable. Usually vulnerability, people run away from that shit. But I'm like, actually, that's where your greatest breakthrough comes through.
Yeah. And talk to me how, like, working with NBA players now, where, you know, basketball is hip-hop basketball. It's a very masculine culture of, like, a lot of times not showing emotion.
Yeah.
And so I'd love to hear about your experience working in this world and then penetrating through these guards that you probably encounter all the time.
Well, first of all, it's a really good time. If you've heard, like, DeMar DeRozan and Kevin Love recently spoke out on, you know, depression they were going through, and they're like, hey, they're reaching out, they're saying this is what I experienced, and then everyone's giving them amazing, tremendous support. So it's a new time. Now, they'd also each made over $100 million before they said that. So it kind of goes to the same thing where it's like, I'm going to say it now that I'm like, I'm good. Yeah. No one's, you know, saying that before you made that. It's like considered a big risk, right? Because you're like, I don't have the security of this $100 million, so I can't say that I'm feeling depressed, right? There was a really courageous athlete named Royce White from the NBA years and years ago who spoke out on mental health, and it seemed like the world wasn't necessarily ready to hear him yet. But now athletes are speaking out, and there's an openness to it. So I look at this as just like a really, people can't deny that this stuff means something. And so what I did was, honestly, I worked with kids who are now in the NBA, right? So my process was, it wasn't that the NBA was ready a long time ago, but these kids were. They didn't know any different, right? They weren't like jaded yet. They didn't have this like mindset of like, oh my God, mental training is bad. They're like, all right, I'll try anything. It's cool. And so now, you know, like Aaron Gordon or Jaylen Brown or Scala Bissare, like these are guys I've been training since they were little kids, and they're just completely open to this stuff. And they know it's helped their life out tremendously. So, and if you actually ask them, like, what's harder? So if you talk about like masculinity or being like a tough guy, being vulnerable is the toughest shit in the world. Like actively being vulnerable is the highest level of like strength to me. And so toxic masculinity is avoiding being vulnerable and blaming the world and victimizing. And this other level is like, it's actually a compassionate space. So people don't tell you compassion and courage are like killer traits for competitiveness, but they are. Because it allows you to go towards this vulnerable space, you know. And Michael Jordan did this training, and I met him a couple years ago, and he said this saved his life, right? He said George Mumford, who taught him this, saved his life. And I'm like, nobody knows that. Everyone thinks Michael Jordan was born some superhuman. He was born a regular guy with an obsessive drive to win, and that was going to derail his whole life until he was like, okay. And then George started teaching him another way, a compassionate way, a mindful way.
It's interesting you bring up Jordan, because I feel like that dichotomy of the influence he had during his career was really interesting, because on one hand, he had George Mumford, which was like mindfulness.
Right.
And then on the other side, he had his physical trainer, what was his name?
Tim Grover.
Tim Grover,
yeah.
Who is more like relentless. We don't really talk about emotions aren't necessary. Just go do the thing at whatever cost.
Tim was accepted at the time. That was an accepted form of language, right? So people didn't know about George, because compassion's not accepted. What? In this world? So like, work harder, don't sleep, just constantly train harder, which the end game is you are working out 24 hours a day, never sleeping, like you're gonna die.
Yeah, like the book, he's like, 3 a.m., call me up, let's go do this.
But I get it. The start of this, I look at this, the start of this is that type of motivation. You can't sit on your couch and practice actionless action or effortless effort. Those are like the highest level of peak performance. But until you prove I work my ass off, then we can talk about actionless action, right? So I look at someone like Tim as a great start to motivation. Work hard. Makes sense, right? Yeah. Work your ass off. If you got to get up at 3 a.m., do it, all that shit. And then once you play that out for a long time and you're like, there's a pinnacle to that. You cannot work out 24 hours a day. You know what I mean? And like never sleep. But it's a start, and then like George picks you up right when that ends, right? And unless you get to that point, which is hard, right? You've got to really go for it. Then the other concepts don't make sense. But now we're realizing, and George, it was a secret, right? It was considered like a competitive advantage, right? And it was new. It was like, what is this new stuff Phil's bringing in? This is like weird, like we're breathing, we're doing all this. But now I think people are aware, just like going really hard and obsessively always trying to work, can be like a miserable experience, right? If you can't turn that off and you achieve all these great results, you're like, it's still not enough. I'm like, oh man, you're suffering. Like, you are gone. So now we've just played that out for so long, people are clearly like, there's got to be something else. Yeah. It's got to. So Tim was awesome. That stuff, it was like, it's all a process. You study like Bruce Lee or someone, like the final stages of all this is actionless action. Like you just let your body do what it was trained to do. Effortless effort, meaning no effort at all. Like you can't tell a 12-year-old, don't worry, no effort is required. Like you gotta be like, no, you gotta work hard. You gotta be uncomfortable. You gotta get up and work. I don't want to, you have to work. And then once you do that for a while, you have to evolve that, to a whole nother stage. And now I just feel like people are open to it because enough people have just done this obsessive, like win at all costs, do this thing, and they achieve that and they're just a disaster.
So do you think that's a good foundation to start with then? Just building good action habits?
Yeah.
Doing that deliberate practice, and then over time, once you start to, I guess, get to the ceiling of like, I can't work any harder.
It should go to work smarter, right? But at first, you do have to work. Like a lot of people, like athletes in general, are comfortable being uncomfortable. They know to push themselves through that. Not everyone has been an athlete. Not everyone is like at 14 learn. I know you have to keep running even though your mind's like, your body's like, I don't want to do it. No, I'm going to do it anyway, right? And so a lot of athletes have learned to like discipline themselves and do it. And I think it's important for like non-athletes to like think like an athlete, to have an athletic mind, where you let yourself go into these uncomfortable spaces. And to me, the first step is you got to work hard, right? Your initial goals are based on like, hey, I got to, like if you're shooting a basketball, you might say, hey, I'm going to get up 500 shots today. The highest level is we're never going to count reps, ever. Because you never count reps in a game when you're balling, ever. But I'm not going to tell a young person, don't count anything. Like, just feel every shot. They'll be like, well, okay, I felt it, I'm out of here. Like, no, you do 500. And after you do that for a while, you realize math, thinking about logical numbers takes you away from the present. So the final part of the training is we don't count numbers. We feel the shot. We intuitively feel it. And when it feels right, you're right.
Yeah. So, obviously, your background's in basketball. How much are you able to take this wisdom that you've gained in regards to like the mental game and bring it into other sports without necessarily knowing all the tactics and the technique of a different sport?
Pretty easily, honestly. These principles, focusing on what you can control, being present, and then moving forward after you make a mistake, those are universal principles. So I've been pleasantly surprised with how many people have been affected by this stuff who are not basketball players. Lawyers, surgeons, teachers. I had someone reach out to me who was working with Interpol over in Europe doing like counterterrorism. And he was like, this is impacting how we like look at things, how we are parenting. I've had people who are going out on dates, have been on a date for a while, and they have all the pre-performance anxiety of going out on a date. Like, it's anybody, right? These are life skills. So basketball was just something I loved, right? And it was like, I'm culturally competent in basketball. I know the language. But if I'm ever working with someone in a different space, I just am like, hey, I'm no expert in this space. I'm going to look to you, men and women, to help me out with this. But I am an expert in knowing how to bring out your best and perform at whatever you're doing. So just that level, they're like, oh, this is reasonable. Like, I'm not going to know the nuance of like a golf swing. I don't know that. But I know if you're trusting your swing, and I know if you're not trusting it, and I know you do need to trust it. I know that. So it's just about connecting with people as, where they are. But these principles are universal. I've seen my wife give birth to 2 children, natural childbirth. That's the most intense thing I've ever seen in my life, right? She trained for each one for 9 months doing mindful training before the birth to go towards the pain, right? To not run away from it, to go towards it, to breathe into it. It's mind-blowing to me. So this works in every capacity. I just took it to basketball because I was like, if I could be in that space every day, I just love it.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I'm right there with you.
Yeah.
So talk to me about how you've taken all these tools that you gained over the years and brought them into your project with Lucid, because I think, like you said, that's when you started to get a lot of like publications and more attention around what you were doing. And so, maybe someone wants to use this app and they want to know a little bit more about it.
So I wrote a book called Play Present, which took me 10 years to write. It's under 50 pages. It's got a lot of pictures. I tried to make it as simple as possible. It's a playbook, right? And it was a language that me and Aaron Gordon could talk to each other when he was a kid, right? It was a way to talk about mental training. And Lucid was forming several years ago, And what they wanted to do was scale mental training, right? They wanted to like, hey, we want to take mental training, use an app, and get it to kids everywhere because everyone's on their phone. So let's meet them where they are. And Lucid was like, all we need is content and a voice. And so I got connected through Lucid through a 6th grade friend named Tony Stubblebine, who was like, hey man, there's this guy named Jason Sturman who wants to like meet you. I don't know, it's like a long shot. And I was like, okay, I'll meet him. And I ended up meeting with Jason Sturman, who was the CEO and founder of Lucid. And when we sat down together, it was another one of those moments that I was like, oh my God. Like we sat there and it was like, this is a clear, and we just sat there and like stared at each other. And all I had was content and a voice, right? He's like, all we're looking for is content and a voice. I was like, holy shit. So I gave him Play Present, and they were like, yeah, this is Lucid. Yeah. So they took the book and like, we're gonna acquire this. Can you make this audio? And we'll record it and build an app. So they took all the concepts, and instead of making it basketball niche, we normalized it for everyone. So in the Lucid app, there's no language that's specific to like eliminating someone, right? It's for people under pressure who want to get results, and there's some sort of time frame on it, right? Which is everybody. It could be anyone. So we put on 200 workouts on there, and we call them MVPs, right? Meditate, visualize, positive self-talk, and we put up 200 5-minute workouts. And I got to work with this incredible guy named Andrew Zimmerman, who helped me take Play Present. He like joined our company, became the CEO of it, and was like, you need to scale this. He was at Stanford at the time. I was doing work with the basketball team, and he was like, hey, man, like, don't be selfish. Like, I know you're doing this here, but like, we can impact people. So he was the first one to plant the seed in my mind that like, this is for more people. And some of my fears is like putting it out there, right? I'm like, I just want to like do this little thing. And so he made me face a lot of my uncomfortableness. And literally right here in the corner of this room, I remember like sobbing in front of him. I was like, I'll do this for you, man. I'm gonna do it. This is so vulnerable for me. Like, I gotta put my voice out. I always thought it was easier for the other person to be like, yeah, you go put your voice out, you do it, you're the man. But then you're like, when you actually have to do it, you know what that's like. And so as we first started building Lucid, it was extremely vulnerable for me. I mean, just hearing your own voice is awkward. And here I am gonna be like the voice of this app, and they also had George Mumford in the app, and here's this guy who I like admired and looked up to, trained Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant. So I was like, oh my God, like, do I belong here? Am I good enough? So I had to like face all of my stuff and then go do it, go hit it. And so we built it, and we spent 2 good years really building Lucid and developing an app that I'm super proud of, and it's out there. But there were so many people that like made it happen, you know. And part of my job with Lucid was I had to do interviews. And of course, with the mental side and mental training, are you allowed to talk about this stuff? And the stigma was no. It's like, you don't talk about this. And so here's another extremely vulnerable experience where I got to talk to like ESPN and like Fox News and all these things. In my mind, I'm like, you are breaking every rule, man. Like, but I'm like, why am I doing this? To normalize it and scale. So screw that. This has to be talked about, right? This has to. Because not talking about it, we're hurting people because they need to know. There's a 14-year-old out there who needs this. And if we don't talk about it, they're not going to get it. So it was like a really uncomfortable experience for me. Well, it looked like I was like, oh, all this like great stuff was happening. And I was like, man, I'm going through it. You know, this is extremely vulnerable. But we put it out there.
Yeah, it's amazing. Know? And I think that's a big thing. Is probably thought back to when you were younger and were like, man, if I had something like this.
Yes. I built it for me as a 14-year-old, right? This is what I needed as a 14-year-old. It wasn't there. I reached out at 19. I couldn't endure not getting help anymore. And now we put it out there and we can reach people. And when I talked to Aaron Gordon, he's like, man, we need to get this to 5-year-olds. Why wouldn't you have this in kindergarten? Just the start of your education. Hey, what's in your control? How do we be present? So what's cool is you're seeing like in detention now in schools, they're making them meditate the whole time in detention. So like, great, that's perfect. Like mindfulness is becoming like a normalized kind of practice. My 5-year-old does mindfulness in her grammar school. It's amazing. Like it's here now. So it's really scary putting your voice out there though, right? Because you put it out there and you're like, what are people gonna say? You know, I'm used to just like connecting with someone one-on-one. I could do that and I could vibe with them, but now just putting yourself out there was open to critiques, but it was like, I had to do it. Yeah. Holding on to my voice wasn't gonna help. That's like a basketball player refusing to take a shot because they don't wanna miss, or someone not applying for a job because they don't wanna get rejected. Go do it anyway. one of the best stories I've ever heard, when I taught at Mission High School, I just want to share the story with you. I was coaching basketball. There was a kid who wasn't good enough to make the team, and his name was Richard Lee. But we were like, okay, you can be the manager. And so he managed for 4 years. So he was there every day. And all he heard was the language we used every single day about focus on what you can control, be here. And no matter what goes on, you make a mistake or something doesn't happen, move on to the next play and do it again. Just do it again, do it again. He took that, he got into UC Berkeley, and he was a writer, and he was applying for the Cal paper. And he applied 11 straight times to get a job with the Cal paper. And every time they rejected him. And he was like, just next play, next play, next play. And he applied the 12th time. And they were so impressed by him. They were like, not only are we not going to give you the job you just applied for, you're now going to be the editor of the whole paper. And so he became the editor, senior editor of the paper, because he kept coming after failing 10, 11, 12 times, which wasn't failure, right? Failure is not getting rejected. Failure is stopping. So now he became like the senior editor of the paper. He's like, it's because I didn't stop myself, and I got turned down 11, 12 times. So with that mindset, it's tough to lose in life, right? And this isn't a basketball player. He couldn't make the basketball team. We're not even close. But he was good enough to understand it, and he applied that to where he wanted to do in his life. And if you don't stop yourself, he clearly then understood, man, I can't be stopped.
Yeah. And I wish I knew that at such an earlier age.
I know,
because I heard this from this guy who coaches entrepreneurs in performance, and he said I don't know, he told me like 5 or 6 years ago. I was like, what is the biggest distinction between people who have these startups that end up doing really well and people who don't? And he's like, the people who don't quit end up winning.
That's all it is.
And that's it.
Isn't that profound? So why would you quit? It's just really uncomfortable. Like, why would you, if you're in physical danger, get the hell out. But if you're, like Richard Lee wasn't in physical danger applying for that job. So why wouldn't he just do it? Keep doing it. So the emotional intelligence has to come in, because it can feel so vulnerable, so uncomfortable. And if your language is, I'm being rejected, I've lost, that'll shut you down. But if your self-talk is, I'm so proud that I put myself out there, if I keep doing that, it's all going to work. Then energetically you feel abundant and you keep coming. So you really have to adjust your self-talk, and you have to coach yourself through these situations. And the truth is, if you don't stop yourself, you cannot be stopped. And some people are afraid of that power, honestly, because sometimes you don't get as much support doing that, because not everyone's doing it. So if you're like, if I'm the only one, like sometimes people want you to fail because it's more comforting for them if they're not doing it. You kind of have to separate yourself from those people, right? You have to learn to kind of really put the right circle around you, which takes a lot of work, especially sometimes if it's coming from your parents or if it's coming from people that love you dearly, which is generally where it comes from. You have to fly there. Even if, and I'm not knocking seagulls, but if seagulls can't fly as high as an eagle, you cannot come down to that space if you know you have wings to fly. I literally look at this, right? No bird soars too high. He soars with his own wings. Like, that's real. And what it requires is loneliness, right? It's lonely at the top. And it's the biggest mystery. You're like, well, oh man, this is really lonely. Because you kind of break away from your peers a little bit, right? I'm 39. Most of my peers at the time when I was doing this, I was like, not only do I not have money, I'm in the hole. Like, like, if I lost my life now, people would be pissed because I owe money. And my friends were like, hey, I'm just getting my first home. All these things are being recognized. And I had to deal with, like, that's their journey, right? This is different for me. And so it's extremely lonely. I'm hoping we get more and more people doing this so this becomes the norm and it's not like some abnormal thing. Like, because what's comfortable is the norm, right? So if we can make this the norm, we can make this a comfortable thing. But it was extremely uncomfortable, Brandon. I'm talking like, I would cry all the time. I'd get really comfortable with that. I would face every fear known. I've sat here before in this garage with my mortgage due the next day. My wife is 9 months pregnant, and I had no money in the bank. And you're sitting there, and you're like, well, and it would show up like that night. And I'm not saying you live like this frantic lifestyle, but that's what I had to do for a while before it got to like this place where we're talking, where people are like, hey, this is something, this is a normalized thing, where NBA teams call me now, right? And this is like a normal thing. It was lonely, scary, lonely, and I would have to protect myself energetically from people that were like, hey, what are you doing? Just kind of like inflicting fear on you, right? But I had really strong, stable people who would be like, keep doing it. This is what you do. And the first couple of years are super exciting because you're like, I'm on it, I found my thing. And then after like 3 or 4 years, like, it doesn't just happen right away. And it's like, no, you're still about 9 years away from this kind of like Thank God I didn't know that. Because then it gets into the dark, right? And you have to like totally let go of the shore of your comfort of like, this is the island I'm from. You have to go to like, I cannot see back. Good, keep going. And then you get into the rough waters and you're out there alone and it's lonely. And that's where it happens to me. That's where you earn it all, right? And as you stay in that time, you come out of that time, right? But you have to stick with it. So it's just the basic principles of commitment, diligence, discipline, like all those things work, or else I would have bailed, right? And I've also been in a moment where another time, our second child, Tina was pregnant again. I get a call, I get offered a very nice job back in the fitness industry, like a really nice job. And I'm like, my head's like, yes, like get out of this shithole darkness, like get out. The deepest me was like, you ain't going nowhere, bro. Like your real intelligence was like, nope. My brain was like, fuck that shit, get out of here. And I had to be like, I'm saying no to the job, right? And I said no, and I hang up and I pull over into a parking lot and I just start sobbing because I'm like, how am I gonna logically explain this, that I'm turning down a really good job? But then on the deepest level, I was like, because you know better, see it through, right? And so here we are talking, right? So when you see it through, it's amazing, but you have to face every fear that's known to like break through. And that was my experience. If you're avoiding all that stuff, you never get the reason the words are powerful coming from my voice is because I've been there. You can say the same words as me, but it may not come from the same source. I've been to the place everyone's afraid to go to. I've swam with the sharks. I've tamed the sharks. The sharks are mellow. They're actually goldfish that dress up like sharks. So these things you're afraid of, man, they're not even really there. And if you can sit in that comfortable place, you literally like sitting in this place no one wants to go. You're like, just so you know, the water's great over here. They're like, what the fuck? How are you there? I'm like, I want to be here. I took every ounce in my body and wanted to be here. And you're going to get these like titillating offers to pull you out of it, to kind of see if you're really about it. And they will stroke your ego. And you'll be like, oh, I want to get out of here bad. But you're like, no, I don't. I'm on purpose. Stick with it. And I had 5 people who would tell me to stay lined up. That's all I needed, right?
Were these mentors, colleagues?
Yeah.
Who were these people?
One was my college coach, Eric Bridgeland. He would just constantly tell me, you have to do this. Like, this is what you're born to do. And I'd be like, I hate you so much. Because I was like, God, I just want comfort for a day. I just want some comfort. It's like, no, that's not it. You want to be 40 and hate yourself? Or do you want to be 40 and be like, yeah, thank God I did all this. So he would coach me through it. Then I would meet like Aaron Gordon. I'd meet these kids that were young and you get these signs like, oh, this is, clearly I can't bail on this. Like, this is clearly it. And then Mission High School, where I started, right? This is the city of San Francisco. It's a public high school. No public school in the history of San Francisco basketball ever has won a state title. Last year, Mission High School won the state title. 116 years of basketball, one school. Mission High School did it. And you think like I started there in 2004 and planted this mindset there, and you see them play it out 14 years later. The kids were like 5 years old when I first started. You're like, no, this is how it works. And I'm sitting there like, I never thought any of that, like I never knew any of this, like historical stuff happens. But notice it was like 13 years later. So there's no quick fix, there's no overnight success. You have to have a plan to get yourself through the middle time. You're excited when you find something that means something to you. You work, think AB will make C, and then AB does not make C, and you're like, what is this? And you have to stick with it. And you have to live all of these things that you want to teach. You have to literally become this thing. So you're not just passing words on, thought leader. Like, no, you be it. Go be it. You don't have to say it, go be it.
Yeah, talk to me about how you maintain that integrity. What kind of, did you say, this is my identity, this is who I am, I'm not going to stray from this? Or is it more like, this is the energy I want to feel, I'm not going to stray from this?
Energy. So every day my energy was like, every time I would face fear and go do it and stick with it, I'd be like, I'm actually okay. And I knew it. But you only know it when you go into it. So I would read my energy every day. You know, the outside world would be like, you're broke, you don't have anything, what are you doing? You're doing this for free with like 14-year-olds, you're crazy. Your wife is gonna have a baby. But I was like, energetically, everyone's attracted to me. Like everyone's like, yeah, keep doing it though. Like, man, your vibration's incredible. So I would read the vibration, and then I did it like an athlete. So I worked out every day. I had like routines, right? Working out puts you in a good place of mind.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, every day I have this thing, I had to create my own routine, which you have to create your own energy. So you have to create your own flow. Instead of just finding any random flow that happens, I'd create my own flow. So I'd focus on food, I'd focus on working out, I'd focus on serving, and I would honor my energy every day. And that would take me through, I would be warm, loving through like these quote unquote dark times, you know, and dark just means there's no money. And dealing with no money though is scary, right? It's scary. So I was committed, systematic, and stuck with it, you know.
So systematic, I want to hear about these systems.
Yeah.
I kind of asked you about this earlier. Was there a spreadsheet that you're like tracking things in, or what are these systems?
Great question. No, I didn't have a spreadsheet. It wasn't anything like that. I'm the kind of person that sees everything crystal clear in my head. Like it's right there. I don't need to like write it. I'm like, it's fucking right there. So I would just diligently go about it like a system every day. So I would say, okay, I get up, I start my day off doing A, B, and C. Maybe I write a little bit, then I immediately work out, right? And then I would go to the basketball gym and work on my craft with the players I was working with, and then come home and make sure I was around people I love, right? And I'd be like, that's a great day. I didn't make any money, and I have to deal with like loans and all this stuff, but I was healthy. I wasn't stressed out. So I didn't get like sick all the time. The only time I started getting sick is when we had kids. It's almost impossible to not get sick when you have kids. Before that though, I could like control my environment, you know? And so I was just very diligent with it, right? I was like working out was my saving grace. That would constantly put me in a good frame of mind. It would get me back into my body, come into the now. It's my form of like an open eye moving meditation, right? Meditation is not just closed eye in a corner, right? It's an open eye alive meditation where I feel my feet on the ground. And I would be okay. I'd be like, I know there's always wicked stories of like, what are you doing? But I was like, I'm actually okay right now. It was hard, but I would stick to that kind of routine every day. And I would stick to kind of diligently doing it. And then when I knew I had to write a book, I became really routine with writing a book. Writing a book was like one of the harder things I've ever done. To sit there and actually write and go through the process, I had to be like, all right, you got to do it for 45 minutes, then take a break, then come back for 45 and take a break. So it was very systematic for me in the sense of like, I knew I had to work every day, I knew what the right action was, and I had to live these mindful skills, right? And I would also reframed everything that like, if you're gonna teach this to people, you're gonna be this guy that helps people with pressure and finds purpose, you have to go through it. So I was like, you have to go through it. This is kind of like your badge of honor. If you're gonna tell a basketball player, I get you have $150 million on the line, but fuck all that. There's gotta be something more. They wanna know you, like, I don't have that on the line, but they wanna know that you put something on the line too. And if you haven't, they tell right away, they can feel it. And if you have, they know it. They know it's genuine, and they look at you like, no, this is real. So I just lived authentic every day, genuine every day, and I fully accepted the sacrifice that I was gonna sacrifice money. I have unlimited credit. I am the most trustworthy person there is. So if you're talking about an entrepreneur, guess who they're gonna put money behind? Because I saw it through. That's the only thing. That's credit, right? Like this person will fucking go through that shit and see it through. So what I found is there's like Bank of America and like Wells Fargo, right? And they have like these credit scores. There's other banks that find you when they realize who you are. And none of that presented itself until I did the work.
Talk to me about that. Tell me your first experience of that.
Basically, I was like, okay, I'm sacrificing money and credit and a pension and all these things that provide safety. I was like, life has to be more than that, right? So your credit score goes to shit, right? Because you're like, I'm getting $1,500 a year to build Play Present. I didn't know it was eventually going to be acquired by Lucid. You have to like stick with it for it to happen. So you go through it and you're like, okay, I'm losing everything, but at the very end, like I meet this bank, Silicon Valley Bank, and they reach out and they're like, no, you're what we're looking for. In fact, what you did with Lucid, we think you're going to do that 5 more times, because most people quit in the dark times. You didn't. We actually think you have the most credit of anybody. So I was like, I didn't know about that. But it only shows itself when you do it. So I'm not saying that's there for everybody, but I'm saying if you go through it and you stick with what your thing is, the most amazing things show up. Because never did that even exist, that anyone that I've ever known knew that existed. No one ever tells you, hey, that's how you get good credit. But I was like, man, all of a sudden, the private bank in the heart of Silicon Valley that funds everything is like, no, we love you. I was like, holy shit. turns out I have great credit, like, because I stuck with it. So what is, like, you stuck with it, right? That's what it is. So I had to break a lot of old things to get there, though. And it wouldn't happen if I quit halfway in it, right? Because then you don't have credit. No, you quit. You're not credible.
Yeah.
You're not credible at all.
Absolutely.
So stuff like that would happen, right? And you'd be like, wow, it looked like, kind of like a miracle, but you're like, no, that's kind of what happens. If you follow all the principles, that's what happens. Like, of course you get those type of rewards. And it's not even like it was a reward. It was just like, oh, wow, check it out. And then the more you experience that, you become rock solid with your commitment. If it was ever a little bit shaky, you have those moments, and you're like, yeah. So now at this point, right, it's not as hard for me to stay committed to it because everything is like, yes, like, way to go. But at the time, early on, it was, what the fuck are you doing? Bank of America was like, you're a fucking idiot, you know? I'm like, in my mind, I'm like, I know I'm not an idiot. Like, no one's telling me that. I'm clearly getting you're an idiot. But like, once you got to a whole nother level, they're like, you're not an idiot at all. In fact, come with us.
Yeah.
Come to these like luxury boxes and like all this shit. Like watch any game you want from here. And you're just like, okay, okay. The real reward was you stuck with it. And internally, you're like, how are you going to stop me, man? Like, and then, so when they said, you did it at Lucid, they're like, you're going to do that at least 4 more times, and we want to be a part of that. It's like, okay.
So cool.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
And all it required was like 12 years of
no big deal.
Yeah, real credit, you know?
So I want to wind things down by just asking you, now that you're aware of these universal truths, and obviously they've worked for you, they've worked for people you've worked with.
Yeah.
How do you want to go for continuing to spread this out and getting it out to more and more people?
Well, first of all, I'm thankful you're here. Like, we are supposed to connect. I believe this is how it's done. I consider myself a sharer. I consider myself a giver, and connecting folks like you who want to give too and have a platform to give. That's why I do this, is if we can help other people, if we can get it to them by any means. So I'm in the process of writing 5 more books. They're smaller books, like real bite-sized smaller books. I'm going to put those out. I have 4 or 5 more albums in my head that I can record. So I think music is a great way to move mindset. I've always believed in music. And I think that's a great way to connect with people. And working with like school districts and kind of normalizing this stuff and putting this in there. And like we talked about, like now meditation is done in detention, stuff like that. And being a real positive advocate for this. So someone like Brandon Marshall, who's a football player for the New York Giants, he's massive in this space. I mean, he believes in mental health the deepest level. I want my kids to be in a conscious environment. I want my kids to be in a world where we're mindful. I want them to be in that space. So I'm here to help people, and I'm open to however you think this is best to get out to the world. I don't necessarily know the answers to that. Like, I can put it in a book, I can put it in an album, I can put it in an app. If there's other ways you think I should do it, I'll do it. Yeah. I'll train people who are considered stars, right? So they can be like, hey man, this is what we're supposed to do. By any means, to get this out there, and I'm not going to stop. It's just, I feel literally like it's 2004. Like I feel so alive with this stuff, and it's not that I'm being selfish, but this also turns me on to do this, right? So I'm like, hey, like I get joy from doing this. Talking to you, this is when I'm present. Like being able to engage with you is when I feel really dialed in. So I don't know the exact answer to that, but I know the more people I train and teach, I'm hoping that some of them, they all keep doing big things. I'm not here talking to this to like hide it. I'm like, share it. That's what people who mentored me told me to do. They're like, this isn't my stuff. We don't possess anything. Help people see this. Get it by any way you can. And I take my competitive nature. I don't let anyone shut me down.
So good. All right. So if people who listen to this get inspired, they're like, how can they follow you or learn more about you, dig into more Graham after they listen to this?
I would say this. I'm not like big on social media or anything like that, but if you enjoyed this stuff, I wrote a book called Play Present. So get the book. It's called Play Present.
I read it. Great book.
Okay. It says it's for basketball players, but it's universal. I had to carve a niche. I couldn't just be a jack of all trades. This is the niche I can get to the top in, get to a high level to really help people. But it's a universal book. And then check out the Lucid app if you want to get daily meditations, daily workouts. We have a bunch of great people work really hard on that. So you get the Lucid app. And then I recorded an album called Unlock. And you can get that on iTunes. I think it's in all the places you can get music. it's unlocked by Lucid Performance. So there's music, there's a book, there's an app. You can email me, Graham@PlayPresent. Just email me. I'll always connect with anyone best I can. Those are the ways I can connect with people. Cool website, getlucid.com. It's a pretty cool website, and playpresent.com. Those will give you more information on all this stuff. So.
Beautiful. Brother, thank you so much, man.
Right.
Appreciate it.
Thank you guys, man.
Hope you enjoyed that podcast right there. I sure did. That was a really nourishing conversation with Graham, and hopefully you got something out of it too. If you did, please subscribe, like, comment, share this with someone that you think would benefit from hearing it, and I'll see you on the next interview.